G'day people, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to feature this piece which is from the great company called Oris, independent, one of the few independents left in Switzerland, and this one has been made available again courtesy of Jeremy, local enthusiast and supporter who has made quite a few of his watches available already. So without further ado, let's just get into the packaging, which I don't have the original box. Jeremy got this with this packaging, which is a nice travel case, obviously original, but it's not the normal Oris packaging. I will link up other Oris videos if you want to see the full Oris packaging and how that looks like. But this one just has a bit of foam in here, and that's the watch on the foam. So let's just show it to you in more detail. So guys, this is none other than an Oris Diver 65. This one is in 40mm automatic. Of course, the model number I'm going to put down the bottom here. It is way too long for me to read out, and I'm not going to do that. So the Diver 65, I think was introduced in 2015, and it was a much talked about watch, in Baselworld, and it's a kind of a mid-60s classic that Oris did, and they kind of updated that, brought it into the modern era with different sizing. And most of the Diver 65 have a more standard type of dial. This one, of course, has a little bit more of a character dial. Most of them have a more standard indices, and they're available between 36mm to 42mm. Check out Oris and other sites for more information if you wish. All product links I'm going to put down the bottom, of course, to things that I can find. Okay guys, so let's just talk about the movement here. Okay, so details down the left of screen, as I usually do. So this one is none other than the Sellita SW200-1, and this is what Oris tend to put in their watches at this level. In this case, the date window is implemented in a 6 o'clock position, a black disc with white writing, as you can see on the screenshot here. It does have hacking and manual winding. The rated accuracy, as you can see in actual use, this is well within that at +8 seconds per day, as I've run this over the last week. Okay, let's talk about the case now. The case here is, pretty classic, right? It's such a classic vintage dive style case. The actual metal of the case measures 39mm. I know Oris advertises this at 40, but the bezel is where that 40 is. The bezel as measured by calipers is 40mm. If you look at the side profile, you can see the bezel actually sticks out beyond the diameter of the case. The case itself, if you measure that, is 39mm. Thickness is more than I expected. It's 39mm, and you can see that's actually hardly taken up by the case. It's mainly taken up by other components, including that box sapphire, the bezel, as well as that dome on that case back there, right? The case itself, hardly any of that, maybe only 4mm of that thickness is the case itself. Lug width is 20mm with a lug-to-lug distance between my thumbs there of 47.5mm. Overall weight of this, kind of lithe vintage piece is only 117 grams, and it's probably one of the lightest watches I have featured on Metal Bracelet. In terms of full weight, it's only 117, pleasantly light on the wrist there. Finishing wise, let's talk about finishing. So the bezel, some sources have it as black DLC. Oris doesn't say that. I assume it's a black PVD of some sort, but a couple of other sources say it's black DLC. I'm not entirely certain of that. The case is longitudinal brush on the top there, fairly straightforward and simple, but well executed. Transitioning onto polish on the side, and of course, as you've seen on the bottom as well, is polish. The case back itself, right, let you see that, is also fully polished really, with a vintage Oris logo in the middle there, with that screw-in case back and screw-down sign crown, right? There's a bit of Oris logo on the crown there. They've gone for a vintage dive rating of 100 meters. I'm not sure if this watch has been tested only to 100 plus 25%. Maybe they've tested it more, but this is what they've said this is, and that's kind of harkening back into old dive style era, which a lot of watches may have only been around 100 meters water rating. In reality, for most of us, even if you go scuba diving to say around 30-40 meters, that is probably going to be sufficient, I would think, with the quality of this construction. Okay, let's talk about the dial now. The dial is where a lot of the character of this particular watch is. I think this is a gloss black dial. Is it a flat dial? I'm not 100% sure. I think this box sapphire crystal really plays tricks on the eye there to make it look as if it's a curved dial. But I've kind of shined light from the side here to get reflections off the surface. I think it's flat, but let me know if you know better than me whether it's curved or flat. The details on this dial are fully printed, right? There is no applied indice or any element here. It does have an inner chapter ring that's inside the hour markers, as you can see there. And it's got a very funky retro font at the 3, 6, 9, and 12 positions. You've seen this on the pictures and all that. And this, I think, is one of the coolest characteristics of this particular watch. The hands are Oris style baton hands, right? Pretty simple, straightforward. It does have superluminova old radium is what this is on all the usual spots. And of course, I will give you a lume shot to let you see how it looks like in the dark. All right, the bezel. Okay, surrounding the dial is of course a 120 click unidirectional dive style bezel, and it's got an aluminium insert which is a slight polish to it, but it's got that high contrast print which you can achieve with aluminium. Let's just hear how it sounds. Probably quite soft. So very soft, 20 clicks there, so it's a 120 click round. If you rotate it quick, you can actually make it sound a lot louder. So it's kind of got almost a variation in how loud you can make it. It's not the best bezel, it's a bit loose, there's a slight back play. So I guess this is not the strongest feature of this particular watch. On top of the bezel, you've seen me play around with this, is a very, very nice box sapphire. That is just such a lovely box sapphire crystal. Lots of cool distortions at angles. And lots of people talk about this, and I can understand why, because this does add a whole heap of character to this watch. All right, let's just move on to the bracelet then. So the bracelet is solid steel rivet style fastening, right? You can see the rivet style there, 3-piece per link in steel with solid end links and push pin adjustment. And I probably can forgive that a bit because, as slim as this is, it's probably very difficult to put quality screws in there. So they've gone with push pins. Let me know if you know about the engineering of whether you can actually achieve screws on this. It's got solid deployant arms there on this push button release clasp here, but the clasp housing itself is kind of relatively thin. It's a bit, looks like pressed metal there. It does have 5-point micro adjustment on the clasp housing, as you can see there. And one thing I'll say about this bracelet is that it's got the heaviest taper I have ever seen, right? It goes from 20 millimeters at the case all the way down to 14 millimeters there on that piece there on the left, now the middle of the screen, or if you measure the clasp, that's 15.5. So pretty heavy taper. That's kind of more like a vintage type of take. Again, so much inspiration from vintage divers. Okay, so that's the description of the watch. Let's just pop it on for the wrist shot for you guys. And there we have it, the Oris Diver 65 in 40mm production on my 17cm wrist. I think it fits absolutely fine, remembering that's 47.5mm lug to lug distance, okay? And very slim, right? It kind of gives the illusion of that it's slimmer than it really is at 13mm, and certainly that bracelet is the slimmest metal bracelet that I've ever seen, right, in terms of these kind of link metal bracelets. Okay, so what do I really like about this? What do people really like about this? I think it's a great vintage inspired design, right? So many great cues here, right? The dial, which really looks like one of the vintage Oris Divers from the 65s. The font, which is funky, right? Not everybody will like this, but I really think this adds so much character. And if I was going to buy one, certainly I would go for one with this font rather than the more traditional indices. The crystal, right, that box sapphire adds a whole heap of character to this watch. I think it's really one of the the stars of the show, if you will. It adds so much in terms of the distortion as well as the character of the watch. Another vintage thing, it kind of looks like the old plexiglass, but in this case it's actually scratch resistant sapphire. And then that bracelet, which, yes, it's push pin, but they've gone for this slimness, and because it's so slim and light, it is actually extremely comfy. One of the most comfortable metal bracelets that I've ever had the pleasure to wear here. And overall, I gotta say, it works some magic, on the wrist. I think the thickness, I told you it's 13, but it doesn't look like 13 because of the way that it's distributed through the glass, the bezel, the case, and the case back, right? When you wear it, it doesn't actually look like 13. It's 40 millimeters, but because that bezel is, quite narrow, it wears larger than 40 millimeters. It really feels like a larger watch. And then the bracelet as well, I think, adds to that, because it tapers from 20 to such a narrow part here, that kind of gives you the illusion that watch is larger than it is, or at least that's what it seems like to me. So there is some amazing stuff here. And then the other thing is also the glass, making that dial look more curved than it is. Maybe it's not even curved, but really gives it a bit of a curved look, and I can't tell for sure looking at this. So it somehow plays with the eye and gives you optical illusions at various levels, and I really love that about this watch. At the MSRP, I forgot to mention at the start, it's $2,100 USD. Realistically, you can acquire this for around $1,600 USD or even cheaper. I think Joma's shop had it for $1,200, so that's kind of the range of acquisition price. I think at those acquisition prices, it represents pretty compelling value proposition from this company, which is pretty darn well respected, right? Oris, a lot of good stuff from them. The things that I would say of concern or points to note if you were going to acquire this watch, right? I think the bezel, I've mentioned this, has a relatively poor feel. It's quite loose. There's a slight back play. It's not the strongest point of this watch. In fact, it's one of the weak points. In this case, the bracelet, I'll mention again, it's got a pressed metal clasp. It's got push pins for the release. One might have hoped that at this price they may have done a better clasp, a more solid clasp, maybe also screws, but I'm not sure whether that's possible. So that's things that I will take note. And then lastly, the rest of it is subjective, right? The date window eats into that 6, so I would prefer if they achieved it without eating into that 6, but maybe that's not possible. This font is rather funky. Not everybody will like that. Some people will look at this and think it's childish, I think. So you probably want to stick with the more traditional type of indices if you don't like that. And finally, I will mention the movement. It's only the SW200. I would like to see Oris push a bit more, perhaps consider adding the SW300. Yes, more costly, but certainly a class above the SW200. All right, so that's it. That's my thoughts on the Oris Diver 65, an excellent piece, a much loved piece from Oris. Let me know your thoughts about this, guys. Would love to hear your comments if you have any experience about these watches, any of their sizes, or if you have any general experience with Oris themselves. Let me know in the comments below. Guys, if you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. New content every week, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thank you again for joining me, and as always, I'll catch you guys next time.